Hi everybody. Okay, I'm going to do chapter 20 of To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm really screaming through these videos today. So most of this discussion will be me reading directly some of Atticus's closing argument and talking about that. Some great speech making here on Atticus's part, which means some great speech writing on Harper Lee's part, who actually wrote the book. But we start chapter 20. Remember dill, just kidding, not this dill. That's the herb. I'm talking about Dill, the character, if you remember him. He's the one who always shows up and every summer and hangs out with Jem and Scout. He starts crying during the trial, and he's upset because of the way Mr. Gilmer is treating Tom Robinson. He's just upset by it. He can't understand it. I would be upset too. But everybody else seems to be inured to it, accustomed to it. But not Mr. Dolphus Raymond, who's not in there watching, and he says, you know what, I understand what you're going through. And the first thing he does is he offers Dill a sip of whatever he has in a bottle in a brown paper bag. Just explain this in case you don't know this, in usual custom, I guess. So Dolphus Raymond, when he's walking around town, he has a bottle and it's in a brown paper bag, and he's always drinking out of it. You may know what that implies, or you may not. Usually when someone is drinking out of a bottle that's still in a brown paper bag, that means they're drinking alcohol, and they're just too polite to, have an open container of alcohol out in public. In Maine, that's actually illegal. You shouldn't be doing that in public. But Dolphus Raymond is supposedly drinking alcohol. So he gives a sip to Dill, who actually drinks it. Please don't drink soda or drink anything that a stranger gives you guys. And Dill starts laughing. He's like, it's just Coca-Cola. And they can't believe it. Mr. Dolphus Raymond is pretending to drink alcohol and look really bad, when in fact he's not at all. He's just drinking Coke. And they don't understand why he would do that. And he says, well, it's mighty helpful to folks. Secretly, Miss Finch, I'm not much of a drinker, but you see, they could never understand that I live like I do, because that's the way I want to live. Remember, Dolphus Raymond, he lives with black people. He marries a black woman, or he is married to a black woman. And the society that he lives in can't understand that. So he thinks he's helping them out by pretending to be a drunk, so they can say, oh, he's just a drunk, that's why he does it. Mr. Dolphus Raymond is ahead of his time by years, and he is, he thinks that his society needs an excuse for him to hang out with black people, and so he gives it to them. He doesn't really care about what his reputation is. He jerks his head at Dill on the top of 269. He says, things haven't caught up with that little one's instinct, yet. Let him get a little older and he won't get sick and cry. Maybe things will strike him as being not quite right, say, but he won't cry, not when he gets a few years on him. He's talking about Dill and the reason he cried, and in the courthouse. And that really is one of the overarching themes of this book. We're dealing with a theme that deals with loss, innocence, a loss of innocence. If you see Scout, the derogatory language that she picks up and throughout the chapter, and not just the N-word, but other words too, she uses it because she hears it from other people. And so it seems like kids are not born saying bad things about other people or doing bad things. They learn it from their society, and it looks like Dill has not learned racism from his society, and it seems to be hitting him the way they're treating Tom Robinson, hitting him more acutely because he's just figuring it out. That's really tragic. That's sad. Children should not be learning to be racist in their own society. And Scout picks it up, or is picking it up, but Dill is really having a hard time coming to grips with it. And so what Dolphus Raymond is saying is that, yeah, when he gets older, he'll stop crying about it. And Dill is like, cry about what, Mr. Raymond? And this is what Mr. Raymond says. Cry about the simple hell people give other people without even thinking. Cry about the hell white people give colored folks. Cry without even stopping to think that they're people too. And Dolphus Raymond here is talking about, the way white people treat black people. But this can also apply to others. This can apply to the way people treat Boo Bradley in this book without even thinking about it. or thinking that Boo Radley is a person. This could be, referring to other things as well, not just white people versus black people, or the way that Maycomb treats the Ewells and Mayella in particular, without even thinking about it. So anyways, Dolphus Raymond gives them a piece of his mind. He tries to cheer them up, but they do remember that they are missing a pretty cool trial. So they go back in. Dill says he's feeling better. And we get to Atticus. He's giving his closing argument. And a closing argument is a speech where a lawyer gets to say what he or she thinks, and does not have to ask questions. Throughout the rest of the trial, lawyers can only ask questions of witnesses. But now he gets to speak and talk about the evidence and the answers that they've gotten from the witnesses. One thing that Atticus does that really freaks out Jem and Scout is he loosens his collar and unbuttons his collar, and loosens his tie, and he actually takes off his coat. And apparently that's really weird for Atticus. Even in his own house, he doesn't take off his coat unless he's ready for bedtime. Like, he's pretty formal here. So that just shows us how into this closing argument, into this trial, how personal of a trial this is for him. I want to skip down to some of the poignant parts of the speech. On 271, Atticus says, and I'll stop reading when I guess I feel like it and kind of skip ahead. But in this closing argument, Atticus says, the state has not produced one iota of medical evidence to the effect that the crime Tom Robinson is charged with ever took place, meaning, remember, there was no doctor ever called. It has relied instead upon the testimony of two witnesses whose evidence has not only been called into serious question on cross-examination, but has been flatly contradicted by the defendant. The defendant is not guilty, but someone in this courtroom is. Atticus is talking about Bob Ewell. He thinks Bob Ewell is guilty of assaulting Mayella. Now listen to what he says about Mayella in his closing argument. I have nothing but pity in my heart for the chief witness for the state, but my pity does not extend so far as to her putting a man's life at stake, which she has done in an effort to get rid of her own guilt. So he says that he feels bad for Mayella. But he can only feel so bad for her, and he cannot condone her putting Tom Robinson's life at stake to get rid of her own guilt. I say guilt, gentlemen, because it was guilt that motivated her. She has committed no crime. She has merely broken a rigid and time-honored code of our society, a code so severe that whoever breaks it is hounded from our midst as unfit to live with. She is the victim of cruel poverty and ignorance, but I cannot pity her. She is white. She knew full well the enormity of her offense, but because her desires were stronger than the code she was breaking, she persisted in breaking it. She persisted, and her subsequent reaction is something that all of us have known at one time or another. She did something every child has done. She tried to put the evidence of her offense away from her. But in this case, she was no child hiding stolen contraband. She struck out at her victim. Of necessity, she must put him away from her. He must be removed from her presence. From this world, she must destroy the evidence of her offense. She tried to kiss Tom Robinson, Atticus says, and because she tried to kiss him, a white woman trying to kiss a black man in this society, in this time period, he says, goes against their culture, their belief. It's an unspoken rule. Well, it's rather spoken of, but it's an unwritten law that white women do not try to kiss black men, and vice versa, obviously. So she put her evidence, and Tom Robinson would be that evidence. Atticus says he must put her away from her. And Gregory Peck, this is Gregory Peck, the actor who plays Atticus Finch. He does a great job in this movie. I do think it's kind of a weird action he does when he is saying she must put him away. He does like a thing with his hand. I can't even show because you can't see my hands, but like paddles his hands almost. I don't know. But anyways, and so she talks about why Mayella is motivated to get rid of Tom Robinson and to accuse him. He goes over the part where Bob Ewell is left-handed, and how Mayella was beaten by somebody who leads with their left hand. And He talks about how Tom Robinson had the unmitigated temerity to feel sorry for a white woman, has had to put his word against two white people's. I need not remind you of their appearance and conduct of the stand. You saw them for yourselves. So Atticus is talking about how Bob Ewell and Mayella Ewell acted. They acted out of line. They were disrespectful. Tom Robinson came up and testified, and he was respectful. And he had to contradict what two white people said, which we've already talked about is really hard for a black man to do in this time period of the book. I want to talk about a part that of this speech that Atticus gives, this closing argument, that is just really great. And I think this is, if you don't learn anything from this book, I think you should learn this. The witnesses for the state, and this is on close to the top of 273, if you're following along in this book. The witnesses for the state, with the exception of the sheriff of Macomb County, so he's talking about Bob Ewell and Mayella Ewell, have presented themselves to you gentlemen, to this court, in the cynical confidence that their testimony would not be doubted, confident that you gentlemen would go along with them on the assumption, the evil assumption, that all Negroes lie, that all Negroes are basically immoral beings, that all Negro men are not to be trusted around our women, an assumption one associates with the minds of their caliber. What he's saying here is Bob Ewell and Mayella Ewell came up here. They acted really awfully, but they were confident that you would believe them over Tom Robinson because you would believe, you would assume that all black men lie, or all black people lie. All black people are immoral beings, and that all black men are not to be trusted around white women. And he says, an assumption one associates with minds of their caliber. He's like, that kind of assumption that you would make is one that belongs to people like Bob Ewell and Mayella Ewell, minds of that caliber. He's saying that's a really, intelligent people don't make that assumption. Which, gentlemen, we know is in itself a lie as black as Tom Robinson's skin, a lie I do not have to point out to you. You know the truth, and the truth is this. This is the lesson I want you guys to learn. Some Negroes lie, some Negroes are immoral, some Negro men are not to be trusted around women, black or white, but this is a truth that applies to the human race and to no particular race of men. There is not a person in this courtroom who has never told a lie, who has never done an immoral thing, and there is no man living who has never looked upon a woman without desire. So what he's saying is that he's like, not all black people are bad. He's like, some are. He's like, but that applies not just to black people, to white people, to all of us. We're all human, and there are bad people, and all across all ethnicities. And so that's what Atticus is saying. Of course, he's using outdated language. He's a man of the 1930s, but that's a great point that he makes. So the rest of his closing argument is good. He starts trashing the Department of Education. I'm going to, as a teacher, conveniently skip over that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just trying to make this a little shorter. He doesn't, we remember the problem that Scout had with school and how she felt like she was being held back. And Atticus seems to actually hold a grudge to that. And he brings that up. He's like, we're pushing forward the people who can't at the expense of those who can. And so he does kind of go against that, but he's like, hey, that's not true for the law. Okay, he's like, we all have equal justice. We all deserve equal justice. Tom Robinson is black, and he doesn't get equal treatment in our society, but he deserves equal justice in our society. And Atticus just says, basically, do your job. So to the jury, and for the love of God, in the name of God, believe him. That's kind of one of his closing lines. So anyways, that's chapter 20, Atticus's closing argument, which is a great speech. I didn't read it to you in full. And Dolphus Raymond's remarks about how white people treat black people and how awful it is. So I hope that clears things up for you and that wasn't too long and boring. Watch me while I find the stop recording button. Yes, stop recording.